Rock and stone in the heart.
So there are 4 new weapons that came to Deep Rock Galactic for Season 2. Every class got another secondary weapon. For the gunner, we have the arm shore, I call it the arc shore, but the arm shore coil gun. Alright, basically coil gun or rail gun. The scout got access to the Nishanka Bolt Shark, which is crossbow. Driller got access to the Colette Wave Cooker. And the engineer got access to the Shard Defractor. Now, coming into this, my personal thoughts were going to be that the Bolt Shark was going to be my number 1, with the Shard Defractor being my number 2, the Coil Gun being number 3, and the Cooker being number 4, in terms of how I would like them. I'm actually surprised to say I was a little bit wrong. So, coming in, looking at what each class needed for a secondary. The gunner has a kind of a jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none style to their weapons. All 3 of their primaries can be built for single-target DPS and for crowd control. They're all designed to be relatively high ammo capacity wave clearers. Now, how they do their damage is different, what elemental effects they do is different, but for the most part, most of their weapons are designed around the philosophy of big gun go burr. And now that's either big gun go burr, it does a lot of damage to an individual target, or is very good at clearing waves. So for your secondary, you really have 2 choices. You have your Bulldog, which is designed to be a high single-shot DPS target to go into, particularly for long-range encounters if you can hit your shots. And the Burst Gun being kind of a hybrid between an ammo dump type tool and something to switch into if you run like Born Ready and the autocannon. So, coming into what he actually needed, he got probably the premier crowd control weapon in the Coil Gun. The Coil Gun, in my opinion, is without a doubt the single best crowd control tool and wave clearing tool that the gunner has at their disposal. This gun is awesome. This is my favorite gun out of the entire patch. I love this gun. I think this gun is fantastic. This gun is like automatically replacing my Bulldog. Now for the Bulldog, I normally run Elephant rounds, so I have a very hard-hitting, high DPS type option. Yeah, the Coil Gun basically said, oh, I do that, but better. So what does the Coil Gun do? Let's take all the modifiers off and just look at the base stats. The Coil Gun is a charge-based weapon. It has a battery and a reload and an overheat, so it has a lot to manage. Essentially, you have to hold down the trigger to charge your weapon. When it's fully charged, you fire a very high power. It's 130 base damage. For comparison, a Bulldog Elephant round is 120. Now, it's 130 base damage shot. It's one shot. It has to reload afterwards. If you hold the trigger too long, the gun overheats, you lose your charge. You would say that, well, that's not very good because you still have to reload it every shot. The damage is good, right? On top of that, it has this little trail bonus. So it has a damage trail where the trail will follow behind the path of the projectile, which pierces through solid cover, by the way. It's a railgun. It shoots straight through walls. So, if you have a buddy halfway across the map that's grabbed by a cave leech, if they ping it, you can literally just use the coil gun and pop them free from halfway across the map. This gun is really good by default. I fell in love with this my first time using it. Mostly as a hard-hitting option. This is the hardest-hitting secondary that the gunner has. This gun deals massive damage. Now, it does cost 40 ammo per shot out of 640. So it's not the most ammo-efficient weapon, but it's still pretty good. Alright, so you know that it has a 2.5-second reload. It does a high damage. It has built-in penetration. It does get weak point damage, by the way, but it's only if it hits the weak point first. So it's not going to, like, pierce through solid armor and hit a weak point and give you the weak point damage. If you hit the weak point first, you get the bonus. Yeah, it completely ignores armor, by the way. There's no need for an armor break mod on this. at all, or a penetration mod. This thing, you can shoot this in an oppressor's face, and it does the damage. So looking at your upgrades, Tier 1 is insane on upgrades. The worst upgrade you could actually run is Extra Coil. Now, obviously, Extra Coil is great for the higher difficulties where that extra 40 damage helps with your breakpoints. I do like the extra charge speed. This makes it so you charge lightning quick, but there's no reason not to run the larger battery. The larger battery is a bonus 280. 280 damage. Now, you might be wondering, well, 280, you know, that's a decent amount. It takes your ammo up to 920. Remember, you take 40 shots, so you're getting, I think, like 23 shots out of this thing before you run out of ammo, which is insane for the amount of damage that this gun does. Now skipping down to Tier 5, where there's the obvious choice of the electric trail. So we'll cover our other two options real quick. This is useless right here. This adds an extra 0.5 seconds to the 0.5 meters to your trail radius. It makes it bigger. Ignore that. This one is kind of fun. It makes it so that you killing a burning enemy turns them into a giant explosion. This deals like 200 damage, I think. I haven't tested this, mostly because I don't run burn stuff on him. No, you run the electric trail. The reason why is it adds a secondary damage modifier to the electric trail. So now you have two trails at once. You have your regular trail and your electric trail. This is going to combine to give you roughly 70 DPS per second that enemies are in the trail, and because it's an electric effect, it's going to also slow enemies down. So I just want to mention how good this is, that they stay in the trail longer. You're looking at about 70, 80 damage per second between the two trails. So anything that's going to survive the initial 130 hit is probably going to die afterwards. And even if it doesn't die afterwards, it's really good. Unfortunately, these two tiers really only have one choice. So you have the damage, the defense enhancement. This gives you 50% damage reduction while charging. This is just nice to have. Or shockwave. This gives you a small 20 bonus damage in front of you. This is not that good. This is really good. You can actually use this because it's any form of damage reduction. This is flat, universal damage reduction. So if you're about to fall to your death, you can just charge a coil shot as you're landing. It also works, by the way, if you end up overheating the gun as well. You can use this as just a quick way to avoid taking damage in some cases. I actually used this damage resistance modifier while my shield generator was on recharge. I survived a bulk detonator. So this is really good. Same thing here. You don't want the fear. It's actually going to chase enemies away from your trail. You obviously want the stun. This puts a stun on the trail as well. That way there, you now stun enemies so they stay in the trail even longer for more damage. This is really where your interesting choices are. So all your interesting choices, all your difficult choices, this is what I actually just finished testing, are in Tier 2. Now, my personal preference is the reload speed. It basically cuts the reload time in half. I like that. I find myself in a habit of, like, firing one shot and then switching back to my primary while the damage is in play. So the reload modifier is helpful for going back to it. You have Overchargers. So the way this works is the longer you hold the charge down after it's fully charged, the more damage it adds to the individual shot. The downside to this is that you don't have a large window. You have a 1 second window on charge, and it adds bonus damage for every 0.25 seconds that it's held. So at most, you can get a bonus 4 damage ticks up. Now, the damage tick varies based off of your difficulty. So I've seen anywhere from 20 to 80 a tick. So I'm not a fan of this. The controlled magnetic flow makes it so that anytime you have a single part of your charge ready, you can fire the gun with the damage and the energy consumption being scaled to match how long of a charge. So again, this has 4 intervals. So every quarter charge will cost that much ammo. So if you fire this gun at 1/4, you're going to get 10 ammo consumed instead of 40 ammo. But the saving grace for this modifier is it doesn't affect trails at all. So the trails are always going to be the same no matter what. So you can use this if you want to spam out a lot of short damage shots for the crowd control. Here's the thing, I'm preferential to the reload. I like the one-shot potential on it. And with the 920 ammo, it's not really that big of a difference. If you were running optimized magnetic circuit, I could see this being better because you want to charge quickly, so you can basically insta-charge, and instead of having the bonus charge time, you get that back in your reload speed. But personally, I prefer the bigger battery and the reload. This gun is awesome. I do want to mention that the Inferno Overclock gives you an additional trail of fire damage on top of your electric trail and on top of your regular trail damage. So you can stack potentially 3 separate trail damages. There's a lot of really good modifier overclocks for this as well. There's a triple shot one. I really love this gun. This gun is awesome, and I definitely recommend this gun as something that you should consider building around. The second gun that I end up liking is the Shard Defractor. Now, I still have to test these 2 modifiers right here. However, I've tested this whole tree. I love this gun. This gun fucking melts. This gun is bullshitly broken. The engineer's main issue, looking at their primary weapons, is that most of their primary weapons really aren't that great at long range. The shotgun is obviously a close-range tool that can poke at mid-range, but you're not doing a lot of damage. The stubby is a medium-range tool. If you can control the recoil, you can snipe at long range. That's not too bad. The smart rifle has the longest default range, but it's not really a true long-range weapon unless you run the longer lens for the extra range. So it's one of those weapons that is one of those classes that has to rely on their secondary weapons a lot for long-range damage. And all their secondary weapons are heavy weapons that have travel time to them and low ammo. Yeah, well, the Shard Defractor kind of just says fuck you to all that. So the deep core is nice because of its modifiers. If you run it without any overclocks, this is like a clean build right here. Basically just based around ammo and some bonus damage. This is really good for popping Praetorians so that your other weapons get more weak spot damage. You know, and then you have the Breech Cutter with the triple beam, where this is kind of just built around, okay, I'm going to shoot this into a crowd, it's going to deal a bunch of damage, I shoot this into a Praetorian, same effect. Yeah, the Shard Defractor's role is pretty simple. I melt anything that I put the beam on. The only issue I think I have with this weapon is that there's a slight delay from when you pull the trigger to the beam coming out, which makes this a long-range tool. Now, people say, oh, the ammo capacity is bad. No, it's not. All right, let's take the mods off and let's look by default. So by default, you do 7 damage on contact with 7 area damage around the beam. And it deals 25% of the damage dealt is dealt with heat. So it heats up the target and can set them on fire. 1.3 meter beam. Total. It's interesting how the battery works as well. So it has a 300 total ammo. You have a magazine of 50, but there's no reload to it. The magazine automatically refills itself after 1.6 seconds. It takes 13 seconds to discharge. Well, I shouldn't say that. It has a discharge rate of 13 energy per second. So roughly, that's about 4 seconds to discharge the weapon. And then it takes 1.6 seconds to recharge your meter back up to 50. So it's not really a reload. You just have to pace your rate of fire realistically. Think like an overheat mechanic. I was a bit confused at first, but then I understood. You don't even need to know on that. So all of the choices are incredibly obvious. So in tier 1, you have 2 damage options. So you have an area damage, which gives you an extra 2 area damage on your beam, and a direct damage, which gives you an extra 2 direct damage on your beam. Yeah, these don't matter. This gun melts. This gun, you don't need damage modifiers to melt. I can melt a Praetorian in 2.5 seconds. Full armor, no weak spot. Just beam on, it dead. So take the larger battery. This is an extra 100 ammo. Okay, this is very good. Obviously, max ammo is really good. This has no range limit. As far away as you can point, you can kill something. Tier 2, bigger beam or weak point damage. Now for me, I'm not the fan of the weak point damage. The weak point damage is definitely nice. Don't get me wrong. But see, I don't use it for weak point damage. So the bigger beam is better for me. That way there I don't have to be as accurate. Your next modifier, you have bigger magazine size, basically, or your magazine recharges faster. I don't have that issue with the magazine recharging faster. I'm going to the magazine size. So essentially, I can empty the gun completely 4 times. Alright? This is a personal preference. Either of these kind of work, but this is just mine. So then you have armor breaking. Why? Why do you need armor breaking? This gun shoots through armor and melts it so quickly. This is a joke right here. Like, this is absolutely bullshit right here. This modifier, to me, should be entirely replaced with, say, every second that the beam damages armor, recharges your shield. Something like that would be better in my opinion. This is so good. What this does is it makes 100% of the damage you deal inflict heat. You set shit on fire so quickly. This gun single-handedly melts a nemesis. Now the only one I have right here is the electric modifier. This is just really good with the stubby and the smart rifle if you run the modifier with that. Basically it just makes it so that you get 33% bonus damage against electrically affected targets or electrocuted targets. Which, you know, the stubby's really good at that. This is broken. These are the only 2 modifiers I have left to buy and test. I don't think this one's going to be very good. The biomass converter. I mean, I'll give it a shot, but I don't have high hopes for it. The main thing is the Dazzler module. I'm gonna probably try this. This is what, right now, this is what I would recommend at Tier 5 if you are not running the stubby. If you're a Warthog user, or if you run a different type of build on the smart rifle, say an Executioner build, or an Eraser build, I would maybe run this modifier for the slowdown. This, to me, seems really good, especially with certain overclocks. But at least for me, because I like the stubby, this is what I would go with. This gun just melts. Now, this is my number 2 gun behind the Coil Gun for a similar reason to the Coil Gun. It's really good. It's the best option that they have. But unlike the Coil Gun, where the other 2 choices are kind of like, you know, it's like, do I run the Coil Gun, the Magnum, or the Burst Fire? And it's pretty easy, you run the Coil Gun. Here you actually have options. The PGL is actually a pretty high capacity ammo weapon. This is a good weapon for clearing out waves and certain types of objectives. It doesn't really have to be an accurate weapon. You can just pop this into a group for some quick damage. The Breech Cutter does have some really good effects on it, like the triple line beam, and the fact that it travels through a group for a decent amount of time. You know, if you have overclocks around these that you like better, it is a better option than the Shard Defractor, particularly the Deep Core. This weapon, if you have a Fat Boy mod or the Railgun mod for the Hyper Propellant, this is still a better damage option than Shard Defractor. So it really comes down to your style of play, why this is at number 2, even though it is really good. My third gun is the Colette Wave Cooker. Now, unfortunately, I kind of don't like this gun. I have to do some more testing with it. There's a bunch of more modifiers I need to test on this. So the build that I have set up is not really great. This gun is designed to go hand in hand with the cryo cannon and the flamethrower, similar to the Sabata and the EPC, where the Sabata has the volatile bullets, the bonus damage burning targets, and the EPC, which goes really well with the sludge pump and the cryo cannon. You know, it's supposed to have It's supposed to have those modifiers. I don't know why I'm running heat pipe, by the way. I just now realized that. But I'm just not a fan of the constant switching, and unfortunately this weapon fits that mold. So this is a long-range option for a secondary for the driller. That's not necessarily a problem, because, you know, if you look, the Sabata, you know, it does have good range on it, but it's also pretty weak damage per shot. The EPC has good range on it as well, but it also has travel time. So the Colette Wave Cooker, having pretty much the same thing with the Shard Defractor as being a long-range option, does make it a very good and immediately selectable choice. The main issue that I have with it in its base form is it doesn't do that much damage. I ran this initially with this sludge pump build on my first go around, and the sludge pump outperformed this gun a lot. Now, obviously, that makes sense, given that the sludge pump is a primary, this is a secondary. That being said, like, the sludge pump, it was no contest. The only time I would really use this was at long enough ranges. The gun overheats very quickly, it doesn't feel like it does enough damage. There's not really a lot of modifiers for me to talk about, because I haven't played around a lot of modifiers. The ammo one is obviously pretty good. I do need to test this damage modifier here. This one for the shot width is not... I wasn't a fan of this. It basically just makes your beam larger. I'm not a big fan of that. The damage mod I need to test. Maybe it gives me a reason to pick something besides ammo, but I'm definitely gonna pay attention to the damage one here. For this one right here, so you have heat generation. I didn't notice this at all. It reduces the heat that's generated by 20%. This is not noticeable. This, in my opinion, either needs a buff or something. The rate of fire I wasn't really a fan of, and you'll see why when we get later on. You don't need this rate of fire increase. I do need to test down this cooldown modifier as well to see if maybe tap firing it works better. Otherwise, I'm probably just going to go to the heat sink. Even though it's not manageable, you know, if I play with the gun enough, it might get better. For this tier, you have the densification rate, which I do need to test. I'm assuming this is a slowdown, but I don't know the number on the slowdown. So, if it's a significant slowdown, I'd probably run that. This is the temperature amplifier. What this does is this makes it so that targets that are heating or cooling are going to have their temperature radiated to other enemies. It will further radiate that temperature faster. So I use this with the flamethrower, and I just quickly tapped a Praetorian with the fire, and then did the temperature amplifier. The thing I've noticed is on larger targets that need to be heated or frozen, like Praetorians and Oppressors, this modifier isn't great. It's going to overheat the weapon around the same time that you actually get them on fire or get them frozen. If you use this on grunts, there's no need. You can freeze or burn a grunt fast enough where this doesn't matter. This is supposed to go hand in hand with a later modifier that I have to test, which is the Exothermic Reactor, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. So this is the one I would run if you are running the cryo or the flamethrower. I do need to test this modification out here for the slowdown on it. But I'm not testing that just yet. I want to test the damage and the cooling first. I have to test a bunch of these. So let's start with this. So there's two guns, the Wave Cooker and the Crossbow. Both have an issue where your square for your reload now does something because it doesn't reload these weapons. This gun doesn't have a reload on it, and the Crossbow has an auto reload mechanic. So your square button does something different here. Now this is the one I've tested. What this does is when you press it, chooses your rate of fire. So on this modifier right here, what happens is you increase your rate of fire significantly, but it shortens your beam. The rate of fire increase is nice. That is true, and I don't really care about the beam because I'm pretty accurate with my weapon anyways. The main issue I have is the overheat. This gun overheats very quickly on this modifier. Which, again, the gun already has a problem with overheating in the first place. This makes it so much faster. I'm gonna try this and see how I like it. I do need to test this one next. So the way it works is this. It says it curves the microwaves further. I don't know what that means. I'm assuming this makes the beam bigger, but it increases the heat per shot. I'm probably just going to run the power supply overdrive in case I need a rate of fire boost. But realistically speaking, I don't really use that mode that often. These mods might be better as overclocks as opposed to actual things. It also means that you don't get a weapon inspect, because if you press square for your weapon inspect normally when the gun's fully loaded, now you switch between. So I need to test this out. This is the Exothermic Reactor. This is supposed to do a temperature shock pretty much instantly in anything that is either on fire or frozen for massive damage. Seeing good results, but I literally just unlocked this since the last time I played Driller, so I haven't gotten the chance to play this yet. Boiler Ray looks pretty good. If I run the temperature amplifier, I'm definitely probably going to run this. But if I end up liking the slowdown, I'm probably going to end up running this. This is going to make it so that biological targets have an explosion chance. I'm interested to see how often the explosion chance is. Like on the flamethrower, it's 50% on the flamethrower. Same thing on the cryo cannon, it's 50%. If this is 50% along those lines, that would be a nice area tool. But I'm not sure. This one to me is stupid. This is bonus damage against poison and corroded targets. I suppose this is supposed to make this gun work well with the sludge pump. But if the whole design of the weapon based around Exothermic Reactor and the temperature amplifier is, oh, we want you to use this with the cryo and the flamethrower, this modifier seems a bit weird. Either that, or maybe take Boiler Ray and switch it with the temperature amplifier, so you choose between either the slow or the explosion, and then you choose between all three of your temperature mods here. It seems a bit odd to me. I do need to play around these three. At first, I wasn't even going to use this mod at all. I thought this mod was going to be terrible, but I realized, oh, I can run this with sludge pump and get the effect on it. I do need to do some testing on this. I mean, it's not a bad weapon. It does work well with his primaries. It has really good synergy. It's just you have to do a lot of switching, and I'm not a big fan of, doing all that switching. The Bolt Shark is probably the biggest disappointment. I know I've spent 30 minutes on the past few weapons. I'm going to try and cap this at a 40-minute time. So I got 12 minutes to talk about this. And I thought I was going to love this weapon. I have one more thing to test on this. I hate this. I actually hate this weapon. In my opinion, when I looked at the synergy of the weapons, all of the other weapons have great synergy. This is terrible. Here's your initial issue. So you have the deep core, which is kind of the jack of all trades but master of none. This is good as a long-range weapon if you control your recoil. It's a solid medium-range weapon, and it can be good up close if you build it for rate of fire. You have the M1000 Classic, which is basically a sniper rifle. Good for medium long-range damage, but not good up close. High single target damage, low ammo. And again, the deep core is a single target damage. They're not really crowd control. Okay. Then you have the plasma carbide, which, unless you're really running the impact deflection there, which got nerfed, along with the plasma carbide itself, which I don't think the plasma carbide need to nerf. I think the impact deflection definitely needed the nerf. I don't have an issue on the nerf on this, but I don't think the gun by default needed the nerf that it got. It got a nerf where rate of fire or projectile speed both went down, where if you take the tier 1 modifier, it makes it better, but you're still losing the other one. I really don't think it needed that. But this is primarily a close to medium range weapon, because it's not great at long range, given the fact that the projectiles have travel time. This is a battery-based weapon with an overheat mechanic, but the battery is relatively low unless you run the larger battery, because you only have 800 by default. So you can actually burn through that fairly quickly. The M1000 goes through ammo, again, unless you take the ammo modifier, you only have 96 rounds. The deep core is alright, without the ammo modifier, it's at 375. In my opinion, of all the default ammo modifiers, that lasts the longest. Why am I talking about ammo so much? Well, because most of the time when you pick a primary, you have to pick your secondary to complement it. Which brings me to the secondaries. So you have the jerry-rig boomstick, which is supposed to be a very close range, low ammo, high damage option. Now, I think it does lack some damage in my personal opinion, which is why I have it built for damage. But if you run the boomstick with the AR, you're pretty balanced. Your AR is more your mid to long, and your boomstick for anything that gets close. If you run the boomstick and the scout rifle, you're covered for long range and close range, but you have the issue of running out of ammo a lot. And if you pair the boomstick with the plasma carbine, you're gonna lack that long range DPS that the other two builds have, and you still might run out of ammo. So generally, if you're running the boomstick, you're going into it knowing you're gonna have to watch your ammo a little bit more. And you have the Zhukov's, which is a solid weapon, overall weapon. It's a close to medium range weapon. If you can control the recoil, you can poke with it at long range. I wouldn't advise that. This is mostly an ammo dump type weapon. This is something that's very good for just, I switch into this, I unload some ammo at whatever's in my face, and then reload my primary. This is not a bad option on any gun, on any primary. And unfortunately, the fact that the Zhukov's is still the best secondary choice out of all of your options, and that the boomstick is still the second best secondary choice of all your options on Scout, is the problem. So here's the issue with the Bolt Shark. Let's just look at it by default, because the default stats on the weapon aren't bad. It deals the highest damage per shot out of any single shot on the Scout's arsenal. It deals 105 total damage. Now, 60 of that is radial damage, which is applied to a very small area. That's not really that obvious. It carries 20 ammo. It has a reload time of 1.75 seconds between bolts. The downside is it is a crossbow, so it fires at an arc. What does this mean? Well, first off, it means that it's not a long-range tool, and it's not used for shooting shit on the ceilings. This is strictly for shooting stuff on the ground. This is strictly for shooting things at close to medium range, because those bolts are hard to arc. This is supposed to have piercing damage. I'm not getting piercing damage on it. There's no armor break on this, which kind of sucks. There is a stun. I mostly use this right now as a tool for stunning Praetorians, because it is actually the Scout's most reliable stunning option in their arsenal, believe it or not, outside of the Scout Rifle modifier. This is a very good weapon if you want to pop a Praetorian in the face for the stun, get some distance, and then keep firing. So, what's with this weapon synergy like? Well, if you run it with the deep core is now your long-range option, and your ammo dump option. You're kind of using the Bolt Shark for your high DPS at close medium range. If you run it with the M1000 Classic, first off, you're going to run out of ammo a lot. Second off, you're also lacking that close range DPS because the Bolt Shark is not a high rate of fire weapon. This is not, while it may do a lot of damage, it's not like the shotgun or the Zhukov's where you can pull it out and it has both a quick reload and a quick rate of fire. Either or. It's slow rate of fire and it's slow reload, which makes you want to run the M1000 as more of a hip fire build, but then you lose the long range damage that the M1000 is there for. And if you run this with the plasma carbine, you still have the same issue of not having the long-range DPS, having to worry about running out of ammo, and now you have the added risk with the Bolt Shark of it's a stunning tool, whereas the plasma with little armor break and penetration, which is one of the main issues that the plasma carbine has without the aforementioned impact deflection. So this gun really doesn't fill any need. Now, when I saw the trailer, I thought this was going to be great. One of the things they highly talked about was the reload, where was the reusable ammo. That only works if you miss your shot. If you miss a shot, the bolt has a small light source around it that'll stick into a wall and light up and let you know. So you can use this as a poor man's flare gun, I guess. If you miss a shot, doesn't really do anything. The other issue I have is almost the entire tree is realistically based around these special bolts. And I don't like any of these special bolts whatsoever. So let's talk about the regular options first. In Tier 2, you have more damage, which is really good. This gives you 25 bonus damage, which is a bonus 15 in radius. So it deals 130 damage a shot, 75 of which is in a small area. It's not direct. Now, this is good in my opinion, because the Bolt Shark has another issue. By default, has 2, it one-shots everything. That's a grunt. On has 3, it one-shots everything that's a grunt, but now acid spitters, guards, and slashers are not one-shot unless you hit a weak point. And on has 4, you are not one-shotting anything if you don't hit the weak point, which is relatively hard to do. Because remember, it has a weird arc to it. You can hit the body pretty well, but not necessarily the head. Now, running this modifier does make it so that you can still one-shot grunts on has 4 without the weak point damage, but you still need the weak point shot for everything. I do want to mention as well that this gun doesn't have a weak point damage modifier, which I would have actually liked to see for once. Now, the other 2 options in this choice are bonus ammo, with the expanded quiver giving you bonus ammo based on the special arrow that you choose. I don't like special arrows, so to me this is worthless. I also think that the special ammo, because it's not that good, the extra 7 arrows is pretty good. That's pretty decent, an extra 7 shots with how useful the damage is on it. You can pick up the shots that you miss, which is nice, but the only modifier I have left to test out is this one right here. Wait, this one right here, the radio transmitter module, by the way. So that's a bit finicky on how it works. But, so you have, for Tier 3, you have reload, and you have projectile speed. So projectile speed, this is the first one I ran. This is bonus 50% projectile velocity. I kind of wish that this was like the grenade modifier, where it changed the arc instead. So it's now a straight shot instead of an arc. But it is what it is. I really don't notice the projectile velocity. I mean, I don't really miss my shots anyways, because I'm not sniping with this. I did run a game on Magma Core where I was trying to snipe faraway targets in a pretty open room, and the bonus projectile velocity was not helping me hit this. The reload speed is much better. The reload speed is mainly there, not necessarily for reloading, but for switching ammo types. That's something that's not listed, but it does that as well. And given that you're gonna run a special bolt, if you want to use your Tier 1 or your Tier 5 mod, I really think you kind of have to take that. In my opinion, this needs either a buff. This either needs like a massive projectile velocity. Maybe this could go away. Maybe this could be something more beneficial to giving the tool some more utility. Maybe this could be something where it could work kind of like the grappling hook, where if you use this mid-grapple, it allows you to extend your grapple for, say, half a second. That could maybe be something here. I really just don't like... I feel like this modifier right here is not needed. For this modifier, so I still have to test this. This is basically supposed to make it so that any of your retrievable bolts can be brought back to you at long range. I really don't see any use here. The Battle Frenzy's nice. It lets you move faster for a short duration after killing an enemy, because you know it's a scout. Scout has to have the speed build. And I don't normally run these modifiers, but like I said, I haven't tested this mod. I need to test this mod. This will be the last one. So, like I said, the default weapon is not bad. I mean, it's not good by any means. It's the worst of the 6 weapon options for the Scout. But it's not the worst weapon in the game. And I think that it does have a use for high single shot DPS. Here's the problem. So, let's look at our mods real quick. So, you have Banshee mod. This makes it so that your bolts have a 33% fear chance. This is nice because you can shoot this into near enemies intentionally to fear them. But I'm not a big fan of fear as a crowd control device. I would have preferred this maybe been a stun mod, where now any target that doesn't get hit by your, or that doesn't get killed by your bolt is now a guaranteed 2-second stun. Or if you shoot this into the ground and it doesn't hit anybody, there's a small radius where enemies have like a 25 or a 50% chance to be stunned. That would be better than the fear mod. Although, to be fair, this fear mod is what you're going to run if you want just basic, if you just want a basic, you know, crossbow bolt build. If you don't want the special bolt. Now we have the magnetic shafts. Now this is supposed to go with the Tesla Bolt, which we'll get into in a minute. What this does is make it that it pulls your bolts towards enemies that are electrified or in an electric field, and it causes them to take, it deals 25% damage to those electrically affected enemies. Okay, so this is great. You know, if you're playing around an engineer that's doing an electric build, if you're playing with, you know, the electric mindlet's burst fire gun for the gunner, or if you're running stasis grenades or the Tesla Bolt. Problem. If you're like me, and you throw a stasis grenade at a Praetorian, an Acid Spitter, and a Mac Terra, alright? You know the Praetorian's gonna be slow. The Acid Spitter, he needs to die. He shoots fast. He hits hard. I don't like that. Or you have the Mac Terra, which I'm not really worried about. Here's the problem. These magnetic shafts pull the bolts to whatever target it wants. I actually died in this scenario because I was trying to hit an Acid Spitter on a Has 3 mission at relatively low health, and the bolts kept going into the Praetorian. I do want to mention that it did more damage. It was able to 3-shot the Praetorian as opposed to 4-shotting him. But the problem is I needed to hit the Acid Spitter. And the fact that the magnetic shaft rounds were moving the bolts away from the target I was shooting them at to what it wanted to do nearly got me killed. Now, obviously, this does work nicely with the special bolt taser so that you can get more damage out of it, but I'm not a fan of this. Probably the safer option is the increase in duration on your special bolts, which again, this is affected by your special bolts. So, what do we have for special bolts? The least useful, in my opinion, is the Taser Bolt. Basically, you press square, it switches your bolt out to your Taser Bolt. You fire it, and what it does is it electrifies targets in a small electric arc between other bolts. So you have to fire this essentially in a set of 2. And it creates a Tesla coil, basically. Kind of like the turret arc mod for the gun, for the engineer. And it sucks. 1 by itself is not very good. Now it has 10 base ammo, and you can run this, which, you know, this increases your special ammo up to 14. That's not really great. That's 7 uses on this modifier. And you gotta get the magnetic shaft and the stasis grenade. You're like, oh, this is a great build. No, it's not. It's pretty bad. Like, you're using 3 modifiers, essentially, for 7 shots. And a grenade. Now, you can use this for the special effect duration, so that now the effect lasts for 11.7 seconds. Almost anything's gonna die in 11 seconds. Unless you're on really high hazards. So, I don't like that modifier. The one that has the most ammo to it that I kind of liked is the Special Bolt Pheromone. What this does is you shoot this into an enemy, which you get 12 bolts by default. And they now fight against each other. So it's like your pheromone canister, but you get more of them. So instead of having, you know, I forget if it's 4 or 6, you get 12. And if you run the bonus ammo, now you get 17. Which is nice, given the fact that that is an interesting crowd control effect. It's not better than the stasis grenade for the electric field modifier. And it's not better than the cryo grenade, which is just direct shit dies faster type grenades. So, if you wanted to run the pheromone canister but didn't want to give up your grenade slot, now you can run this. And you run the special effect duration, it lasts for 13 seconds. The downside to this is it's really not useful unless you shoot this into a Praetorian. Also, I want to mention, this doesn't work on oppressors unless you hit them in the weak point. Or bulk detonators. It feels really weak, in my opinion. It doesn't feel that strong. It also doesn't work against robotic enemies or Macteras because enemies aren't going to fight them because they're in the air. And the pathing on the grunts is they don't fight aerial targets. They know they can't. Now, the one that has the least amount of ammo to it is the Special Bolt. So initially I'm thinking, okay, so this is basically explosive crossbow bolts, right? I fire this, it explodes, right? Right? No. You get 7 shots on this. Which is the same as the Tesla Bolt with extra ammo. So if you run the extra ammo modifier, this brings you up to 10. It's technically more than a Tesla Bolt, but what it does is it poisons whatever you shoot. Which means if you miss, you get no effect. So, it poisons them. For 8 seconds. They take about 20 damage per second for the 8 seconds. Okay. If they die during that 8-second window, what will happen is they will then blow up. But they don't blow up immediately. They blow up after 2 seconds. Here's the issue I have with that. This would be great if it did more damage per second, but had a shorter effect. That would make it a lot better to choose the potent special bolts. It would make it a lot better because now you wouldn't have to try and kill it as quickly. As it stands right now, I can just fire and forget one of these and the target will die. Kind of similar to the neurotoxin modifier for the Bulldog, where it's like a fire and forget on something that's relatively weak. On something strong, like a Praetorian, it's not good. I can see that this is like the synergy with Bullets of Mercy. Like, that's what this is designed for. The Bolt Shark is, in my opinion, seems specifically designed for Bullets of Mercy deep core users. Which is already one of the most overused overclocks on the deep core anyways. There's no real reason that they needed to give Bullets of Mercy another fucking buff. But, okay, so it takes, if they die within 8 seconds of getting shot, basically, it blows up. Why is there a 2-second window on it? Now, I run the potent bolt, so it's now 10.4 seconds. The downside is that explosion time, because it stops moving. That the grunt, if you shoot a grunt with it in the middle of a horde, it stops moving. In that 2 seconds, the rest of the horde has now moved out of the effective range. So in my opinion, this is really like a poor man's see you in hell, basically. Where you shoot this onto a grunt that is spawn camping a downed teammate. And when it dies and blows up, oh, it does some damage. To me, I'm going to play around this a little more to see if I can make it work. But to me, it seems like the Special Bolt Pheromone is just the way to go. And I really don't like how the crossbow works. Now, I haven't seen enough of the overclocks on this to really get a feel for how the overclocks change this weapon. I know the overclocks of the Shard Defractor and the Coil Gun are really good, The Colette Wave Cooker and the Bolt Shark, I'm not too sure on. But I really think the Bolt Shark needs a rework. I think this gun is pretty bad. This gun is pretty weak in my opinion, and I'm not going to be using it for much longer. At least until I get some overclocks that change it. I've heard Bodkin Points is really good, but that's one overclock. So, Bolt Shark bad, Wave Cooker decent. I still need to play around this. Shard Defractor really fucking good, but it is competing with two other good weapons. And the Coil Gun, really fucking good. This is probably going to be your go-to weapon of choice now for